What's going on, everybody? It is Alex from Everything for iPod, and today we're going to be doing a comparison between easily the top two small-sized tablets, the Apple iPad Mini, and the co-branded Google Asus Nexus 7. You're going to have to dish out $329 for the iPad Mini, but to get the Nexus 7, you're only going to have to burn a $199 hole in your wallet. The iPad Mini is 308 grams and 7.2 millimeters thick, while the Nexus 7 is a little bit heavier, 340 grams, although you can't really notice the difference there, and 10.45 millimeters thick, and you definitely can tell that it is a little bit thicker than the iPad Mini. The iPad Mini feels extremely solid, which you would expect from Apple. It's made entirely out of glass and aluminum, so it feels awesome in your hand. It doesn't feel like it's going to break out on you at all, while the Nexus 7 does feel a little bit plasticky and cheap. Here's a detailed spec sheet if you want to see it. I have everything side by side for you. You can go ahead and pause the video because I'm not going to read everything off just to save some time. Just a few things I want to point out. One, that the iPad Mini does have a lower screen resolution than the Nexus 7, and also the prices I put at the bottom are for the 16GB Wi-Fi only models. Of course, both tablets are available for more storage, and as well, you can get cellular models for both of the tablets. A quick Geekbench test shows that the Nexus 7 kills the iPad as far as performance goes, which you would expect when looking at the spec sheet of the two devices. If you want to look at the full Geekbench test and see how the tablets performed in different areas, I'll put the links to the tests down in the description. While the Nexus 7 technically outperforms the iPad, you get a much better experience using the iPad Mini than the Nexus 7. To me, using the iPad Mini felt like I was actually using a tablet, whereas using the Nexus 7, I felt like I was just using a blown-up version of a cell phone application. What I mean by that is there's so much empty space on the Nexus 7. Here I have the same app, Spotify, opened on both of the tablets, and as you can see, the iPad Mini shows much more information. And yes, it does have a bigger screen, but it's showing more album covers, and it really has more of a tablet-like experience, where there's just so much empty white space on the Nexus 7 taken up by blank bars that don't contain any information. This was true in many different apps, but not all. As you can see, Twitter on both the iPad Mini as well as the Nexus 7 are almost identical and perform in the same exact way. To me, it doesn't feel like the iPad Mini's screen is that much bigger than the Nexus 7, because it's less than an inch bigger, and I never felt like the Nexus 7 screen was too small. Now I just feel like it's too empty compared to the iPad Mini screen. Speaking of a better experience, the iPad Mini's experience is a little bit better running iOS than Android due to the fact that all of the icons are uniformly rounded, and also jumping into iOS without knowing a thing is a little bit easier than jumping into Android. You can customize Android on the Nexus 7 a lot more than iOS, using things like live wallpaper as well as home screen widgets. I found typing to be a little bit easier on the iPad Mini than the Nexus 7 due to the bigger keys, and also that Apple's keyboard is smarter and removes things like the spacebar when you don't need them, for example in the URL field of Safari. Web pages loaded a little bit faster on the Nexus 7, but one thing I found a little bit odd was that the iPad Mini would load the mobile version of web pages, while the Nexus 7 stuck to the desktop versions. On the bottom of the iPad Mini, you'll find dual stereo speakers, and right in between those, you'll find the Lightning connector, which is a bit cool because you can put the cable in either direction, but also a little bit annoying because it's not a universal cable, so most likely you're not going to have a ton of them lying around your house. On the bottom of the Nexus 7, you will find stereo speakers as well as a micro USB cable for charging and the 3.5mm headphone jack, whereas on the iPad Mini, the 3.5mm headphone jack is up on the top of the device. Really doesn't make a difference either way. I was able to grip one hand around the whole back of the iPad Mini, but it was slightly uncomfortable and not my preferred way of holding the iPad Mini with one hand. Holding the Nexus 7 with one hand was no problem at all. When I held the iPad Mini with one hand using the bezel, I found that it was very comfortable to do so, very light and easy to use, and the iPad doesn't pick up screen taps if your thumb from the bezel slightly slides onto the screen. The Nexus 7, however, has a little bit of a thicker bezel so you can hold onto it, but if your thumb slides even the slightest bit onto the screen, it will recognize it as a screen tap. The iPad Mini has a 5-megapixel rear-facing camera that can record video in 1080p, but the Nexus 7 does not have a rear-facing camera. Both devices have a front-facing camera that is 1.2 megapixels, and both cameras can record video in 720p. Both of these tablets have features that set themselves apart from the other. The iPad mini has the smart cover, which magnetically attaches to the side of the tablet and sleeps and wakes as you open it, so you're ready to go whenever you open the case. The Nexus 7 has NFC and Android Beam, which basically allows you to pay at any store that accepts NFC, which means you can hold your tablet up to the cash register and you can pay without having any physical money or a wallet on you. Using Android Beam, you can also hold two Android Beam capable devices together and transfer information and files between the two devices. Now you know everything about the iPad mini and the Nexus 7. The decision of which tablet to buy really comes down to one question. Do you want better performance out of your tablet, or do you want a better design and better user experience? Games and apps will run a lot smoother on the Nexus 7, but you will have a lot more to choose from on the iPad mini. Ultimately, the decision is completely up to you, and also price might be something to consider. If you're looking for something a little bit bigger and a little more powerful from both Apple and Google, you can check out the full-size iPad 4th generation as well as the Nexus 10. So, will it be the iPad mini or the Nexus 7? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button as it really does help me out a lot. And also don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future content. If you want to check out some of my other iPad mini videos, you can click the annotation on the screen right now to go see the playlist that's full of iPad mini videos. See you later.